all of those negative internal thoughts are going to produce big emotions. And those big emotions are going to have you reacting instead of responding. And y'all, reaction mode rarely ends in cupcakes and calm. It ends with accidental sarcasm in a staff meeting that offends some people. It ends with an awkward, we'll talk later. And God forbid, it ends with an adult toddler tantrum in front of your team. It can take years to build a great leadership reputation, but only a few seconds to destroy it. This is the Leadership on the Rocks podcast, where we equip and empower leaders like you to thrive in and create harmony between your professional and personal lives. I'm your host, Bethany Reese, and today we're diving into part 2 of my brand new book, Leadership on the Rocks: How to Survive, Adapt, and Succeed in the Wilderness of Leadership. Y'all, we're talking about what I call the head of leadership, or how you think as a leader. This section of the book covers mindset, identity, and purpose. And y'all, these three are the internal GPS system that helps you keep going when everything around you feels like it's on fire, or at least mildly smoldering with, things like policy changes, conflicts, constraints, and people who forget what reply all does to everybody's inbox. Yeah, that too. And so let's start with that beautiful, chaotic space between your ears, your mind, or your mindset. According to psychologist Gary Klein, a mindset is a belief that orients the way that we handle situations, or the way that we sort out what's going on and what we should do. And so a mindset is a belief, or in my words, I think in pictures, it's like your GPS command center that helps you navigate situations. And I'll be the first to confess that sometimes my internal navigation software, it can lead me down the wrong path. And my husband can testify to that. And it's so much so that I had to learn how to upgrade it to a leader-worthy setting, because what I've learned is this hard truth, and I'm quoting it from chapter 3. The biggest battle you'll ever face in leadership and in life is the one in your own head. Y'all, this quote hits like a boulder to the face because it's true. The voice inside our heads, it knows exactly what buttons to push, doesn't it? Especially when you're leading without a clear map and all you've got really is a to-do list and a prayer list. I remember so many of my mornings began with a line of people at the door or a list of emails waiting to tell me all the things that were going wrong. And add to that the daily problems, conflicts, constraints of my role, and by 8:01 a.m., my inner voice was already declaring me a failure. It's dramatic, I know, but it's real. I felt like a failure. My typical exposure to negativity so early in my workday, y'all, it acted as a distraction that enticed my brain and my internal thoughts into the dangers of doubt, pessimism, and even selfishness as I sought respite from it all. I had to learn that your thoughts create your emotions, and your emotions drive your actions. In other words, it's not what's happening externally that has you and me feeling so stressed. It's what's happening internally. It's how we think about the gap between our expectations of how things are supposed to go and then the reality of how we're actually living it out. It's that gap that produces the anxiety and the stress. And if we want to not only survive leadership, but actually thrive in it, then we have to know how to upgrade that GPS software so that we can better navigate the internal mental wilderness that we often don't even realize that we're wandering in. Without the ability to recalibrate and refocus, we risk wandering aimlessly into big emotional reactions that has us in fight or flight mode. I feel like we're going back to psych class in college, right? With fight or flight, you're expending this energy, but you're not making meaningful progress here. Because here's the truth. If you're not intentional in capturing your thoughts before they spiral out of control, all of those negative internal thoughts are going to produce big emotions. And those big emotions are going to have you reacting instead of responding. And y'all, reaction mode rarely ends in cupcakes and calm. And It ends with accidental sarcasm in a staff meeting that offends some people. It ends with an awkward, we'll talk later, where everybody's like now building up stress. What are we going to talk about? Oh my gosh, and they start telling themselves stories. And God forbid it ends with an adult toddler tantrum in front of your team. It can take years to build a great leadership reputation, but only a few seconds to destroy it. Did you hear me? Seconds. Neither you or I want to ruin our leadership because we couldn't capture our thoughts and manage our emotions. And one of the most freeing things that I learned and what I write about in this chapter is that a leader mindset means that you start talking to yourself instead of just listening to yourself. You've got to take control of the narrative in your head before it hijacks your leadership. And if you don't take it captive, it will hijack your leadership. So let me ask you, what story is your brain telling you today? And is that story actually true? Learn to take those thoughts captive by creating a mantra to help you stop those thoughts before they spiral into the abyss of storytelling or what ifs. In the book, I break down how to adjust our mindsets so that we can learn to build that mindset of a leader. And that mindset allows us to, one, just stop our thoughts. Stop that natural flow of thoughts in the moment. And two, use emotional intelligence to reflect on what's happening. And then three, reframe our perspective so that we can see the situation from a different perspective or perspectives. And then four, choose the high road instead of the low road. The high road is where we respond to the challenge, and the low road is where we react to the threat. And so the next time you find yourself in the middle of a fight or flight reaction, just pause and reflect backwards. How are you behaving right now? What have you said or done? And what feelings prompted that action? And then what thoughts actually created those feelings? Were you telling yourself a story? Once you understand your go-to responses and the thoughts and emotions that drive them, you can start developing tools like mantras or reflection questions. And they're going to steer you away from the low road reaction into the high road response. Y'all, challenges and conflict will always come in leadership and in life. We'll all have challenges in our day-to-day work and challenges in our marriages, our parenting, our careers, and our social interactions. That's life. But we need to understand that we have a choice in how we navigate adversity and how we navigate the unknown. We can't get lost in the wilderness of our fixed and scarcity mindsets around the situation, curl up in a ball and think, I can't do this anymore. We have to learn how to upgrade our internal navigational GPS by thinking, wow, that didn't go as planned, but I learned a lot from it. And now I continue my journey towards progress. Now let's talk identity, your internal compass, the thing that points you in the right direction before your world starts spinning. In chapter 4, I write, your identity is bigger than your feelings in any given moment because who you are is greater than any label, title, mistake, or circumstance you face. Whew. Now that one had to simmer for a while in my own life because I love to slap labels on myself, right? That failure by 8:01 a.m. Y'all, my first year in leadership was a total whirlwind. I mean, not only was I brand new to leading, but I was also helping start an entire organization from scratch, hiring staff, building systems, creating culture, all while trying not to drown in my responsibilities. Now, during this early season in my leadership is when I started shrinking in my leadership because I had labeled myself an imposter. Anybody out there know what I'm talking about? I had the thoughts that I don't belong here because I don't know it all and I can't do it all. And add in a few comments like, wow, Bethany, you sure are passionate. And that statement and that tone was not a compliment, y'all. I tried to tone it down. I tried to squeeze into somebody else's mold to be like every other status quo leader I had seen throughout my career. But what I came to find out about myself was that I wasn't designed for staying in the lines. I was passionate, and I am an out of the box thinker. But when I tried to be something that I wasn't, spoiler alert, I got stuck. I had nothing but internal anguish to show for it because God didn't call me to be half of myself. And He didn't call you to that either. That season taught me that without a working compass, without a solid sense of identity, my true north, you can't chart a confident path forward. Identity keeps us grounded in our values, our beliefs, and our purpose, no matter how wild the leadership wilderness gets. When you're unclear about your identity, you're going to default to performing, perfecting, or here's my favorite, people pleasing. All because you're wearing a mask. You're trying to be what you think others think you should be. Now, when your internal compass is set, when you know who you are and whose you are, then chaos doesn't derail you, it refines you. So here's your reflective question. Do you know your true identity? Or are you trying to earn it through your title and your to-do list? Lastly, let's zoom out to your big picture, your purpose. Y'all, the sleepless nights that I had totally caught me off guard. I had the title, I had unpacked my identity, and I thought that I had the mindset to lead, but I still felt lost. Lying awake, two questions kept looping in my head. Why am I doing this? And where am I even going? And then it hit me. I had a compass. I knew who I was and whose I was. I knew my true north, but I didn't have a map. I needed something to guide not just who I was, but where I was actually headed and why. Purpose is the map that gives direction to your mindset and meaning to your identity. And without it, even confident leaders can feel like they're wandering. In chapter 5, I share my lesson about purpose. Your purpose is bigger than your job, your title, or your paycheck. And if you've been in leadership longer than 3 meetings and a budget cycle, you know how easy it is to forget it. During a particularly rough season, I remember asking myself, is this it? Emails, drama, 3 new initiatives before lunch. Is this all there is to leadership? Asking the question, is this it? It can really lead you down that slippery slope to the comparison trap. We measure ourselves against other leaders, against even our own expectations, or heck, against our imaginary ideal life. And all that chasing leaves us asking, how did I get here? Is this all there is to where I'm at? And here's the reality. A custodian's job isn't any less purposeful than a doctor's. Without either, we'd be swimming in the messes that we create, physically or otherwise. Your purpose isn't about status. It's about service. And you can fulfill your purpose no matter what title you hold. So during the hard seasons, and there are plenty of them in leadership, I had to learn to not run from my challenges to the rabbit trails promising me more comfort, success, or status. I had to learn how to run to my purpose within those challenges. So hear that again. I had to learn to not run from the challenges, but to run to my purpose within those challenges. And when I stepped back to remember my why, and I almost hate using that phrase, it's become so cliche, but the reason I said yes to the job, the position, the influence in the first place, I found the strength and the courage that I needed to continue leading. And when we chase the perfect job, the title, the paycheck, the latest trend, or heck, even just a busier calendar that makes you feel important, those trails do not lead to fulfillment. They lead to exhaustion. Pain will always be present on this side of heaven, but it's the purpose piece that makes the pain worth it. The insights, the experiences, and the skills that we gain in difficult seasons will shape us and clarify our individual calling, our why behind our what. So don't miss this. You don't need a new job to find your purpose. You need a new lens to see your current one differently. So, reflection time. Are you working from your purpose or just working from your calendar? Are you chasing a job, a status, or a salary? Or are you rooted in a purpose that won't shift, even when the title on your email signature does? Because once you know your why, you'll always have a mapped route, even when the terrain gets rough. And let's be honest, in leadership, the terrain will always get rough. That's why you can't afford to wander without your internal GPS fully intact. You need clarity in your mindset, confidence in your identity, and conviction in your purpose. And that's what the head of leadership is all about, being rooted enough to stay on course even when the chaos comes knocking. So here's your reminder for the week, straight from your leadership survival kit on caring for the body of leadership. Think it. Get your mindset aligned. Connect it. Anchor yourself to your true identity. Do it. Move forward with purpose and own it. Take responsibility and lead with courage, no matter what role or title you hold. This is how we navigate the wilderness well, from the inside out. Now, if that's hitting home for you, I want you to know you don't have to do it alone. Leadership on the Rocks: How to Survive, Adapt, and Succeed in the Wilderness of Leadership is officially here and available for pre-order. This book is more than pages and principles, y'all. It's a real survival guide for the real leadership wilderness you're navigating every single day. Inside, you'll find visual tools, relatable stories, and tactical next steps. So order your copy now at leadershipontherocks.com. And if you share about the book on any of your social media and tag me at Leadership on the Rocks, you're going to be entered in to win a real survival backpack. Yes, with real gear. So next week, we're going to be heading into the heart of leadership, relationships, communication, collaboration, and it's going to be good, y'all. So until then, keep nourishing that body of leadership by how you think it, connect it, do it, and own it. Until next time, continue putting in the work of building your life and leadership on the rocks, the essential rocks. God bless. Remember, the most essential rock you can build your life and leadership on is the rock of Jesus Christ. Today's Bible verse comes from 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 5. We destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God, and take every thought captive to obey Christ.